experience of the Roof of Africa rally was in any doubt that the route for Racing Section 1 would test crews and competitors to the limit. Conditions were expected to favour the special vehicles, with little prospect of rain. As is usual on off-road events, there was an early morning start, with an air of tension starting to come to the surface. For Harry Roscoe in the single-seater, there was the added problem of having to both drive and navigate.
Exactly the year I almost won the Roof is to follow somebody that knows where they're going and come in close to the finish, close up to the finish within a couple of minutes, and then next day we can go racing. That's my plan.
If it doesn't rain, which it doesn't think it's going to, I think we're going to do well. I think the 4x4s are going to be suffering a bit on the bumps.
Roscoe must have had mixed feelings as he led away the field. He was in exactly the same position 2 years ago and was going like a train when he had a huge accident that left him with a badly injured back. The lubrication equipment single-seater was followed by the Chepek father and son combination in the V-Motors Raceco, with the first 4 cars on the road all running in the special vehicle category. It didn't take the Chepeks long to catch and pass Roscoe. Not that Roscoe would have been unhappy about the situation. Having the Chepeks in front of him provided Roscoe with a navigation aid, but it was also not long before the Sulwalk brothers started to close in on the single-seater. Despite having the Chepeks playing a pathfinding role ahead of him, Roscoe was at a disadvantage in a straight fight with the twin-seater crews. Roscoe had his work cut out to stay ahead of the Sulwalk brothers, who earlier in the season scored their first national championship win in the Settlers 400. The Sulwalks, who hail from Secunda, are chargers, and all they wanted was to get ahead of the single-seater and have a go at catching the Chepeks. Rob Walk in the Super Pave Raceco was in the same boat as Roscoe in terms of having to do his own navigating. Walk also scored his first national championship win earlier in the season when he won the Toyota Desert Race, and like Roscoe, crashed in a big way in the 1992 Roof of Africa when he drove off the side of a cliff. Not far behind Walk, the dealer team Toyota Hilux of Bux Carolyn and Jeff Bell was holding on to 4th place. Behind them, some hectic racing was starting to develop, with the Rockwell Raceco, driven by Nick Harper and Darryl Hill, starting to come under pressure from Linton Draper and Mike Pretorius. In hot pursuit of the Draper Pretorius Raceco were defending champions Cassie Kutsia and Richard Leake in the factory-backed Toyota Hilux. Behind them, Cliff Barker and Mike Redden in the AAD Land Rover were on a charge after starting in 15th position. Barker and Redden led the production vehicle and overall cross-country series championship going into the Roof and were desperate for a good result. And now another trip down memory lane. In 1984, Neil Woolridge won the Roof of Africa on a 500 Kawasaki motorcycle. Woolridge now campaigns in off-road on 4 wheels in the Sani Motorsport entry and reports that driving and riding the Roof are different animals.
It's totally different. It's, I think a lot more mentally tired sitting in a car, because you've got to sit and bounce around all the time. You can't stand up and move around, and you can't miss rocks and things like that. You've got to crash over everything, so you get pretty tired sitting in that car. But not too physically tired, but very mentally tired.
For Racing Section 1, the motorcycle contingent followed a different route to the cars. It was going to be just as tough, with poleman Darryl Curtis on the Winston Yamaha setting his sights on a place in the top 5 at the end of day 1.
Right, I'm happy to be where I am starting first. If anybody comes up behind me, I can at least stay with them. I'm going to try to finish in the first 5 at the end of today.
After taking it easy in the time trial, 5-times winner Alfie Cox decided it was time to stop playing games and came flying through the field on the Pro Action Castrol KTM. When he's in the mood, and that's most of the time, Cox is in a class of his own in South African off-road. And it didn't take him long to scythe through the field and move ahead of Tom Claassen to take 2nd place. Claassen was also under pressure from Errol Dalton on the Shimwell's Yamaha, who was 3rd in the 250 class behind Curtis and Cox. Claassen was leading the 500 class, but was about to lose out to Yuri Human on the Lesotho Office Equipment Kawasaki, with the big guns starting to fire on all cylinders. Richard Manning is the only rider to have twice won marathon events on a 200 machine, and was the first of the 200 brigade on the Winston Yamaha. Behind him, Willie Ireland was also starting to make a move up the leaderboard on the SKF Delmas Diesel Suzuki. On the car front, there were problems at the first refuel for Bux Carolyn and Jeff Bell in the Toyota Hilux. The technical crew were frantically working on the car, while other teams anxiously waited for their charges to put in an appearance.
Seems to be that the turbos, we got no turbo boost, so for the last 30 k's we've been driving without a turbo. But those Ux, we'll get them now. We were up to third. We'll fix them now. Just watch.
After starting from the back of the field in the BP Raceco, brothers Klaus and Gerd Degener were on a charge through the field. The scene at the refuel was one of frantic activity, with cars coming and going at a rapid rate of knots. RP Reinico and Lucas Dreyer in the Toyota Land Cruiser were behind schedule at the refuel. While the Degeners roared back into the fray and other cars arrived at the refuel, Dreyer explained that their lateness was caused by an unscheduled stop to help pull a Sandmaster out of trouble.
Ons het 'n fontein ingery. Dit is 'n Sandmaster gaan uitsleep, dis hoekom ons laat is. Maar niks gebreek nie.
It was all great fun for the local kids, but out on the route it was hard going for the competitors. The terrain was constantly changing, and the quaintly named Don't Cough Pass provided crews with all kinds of problems. What passed for a track was strewn with rocks and boulders, and the cars were slowed almost to walking pace. Race leaders Franz Czepek Sr. and Franz Jr. were being chased by Rob Walk in the Super Pave Raceco. It was a case of picking your way gently through the rocks and boulders, with punctures and ever-present danger. Behind Walk, the Sulwald brothers, Herman and Karl Heinz, were also going well in the Sulwald for Food Raceco, and for once they were adopting a cautious approach. There was also a cautious approach from Springboks, Cassie Coetzee and Richard Leek in the Toyota Hilux. Still out in front in the quad racer category was Francois Coetzee. The lighter and much more manoeuvrable quad was a lot more spectacular than the cars, with Harry Roscoe in the lubrication equipment Raceco also carefully picking his way through the rocks and boulders. Behind Roscoe, the Barker Redden Land Rover and the Carolyn Bell Toyota were being chased by the Harper Hill Raceco and Klaus and Gerd Degener in the BP Raceco. Problems during the time trial saw the Degeners start from the back of the field, but they were cutting their way through the pack. Driver Klaus is a racer through and through, and he saw in the conditions the opportunity to pick up a place or two. At the bike refuel, cans of petrol stood like lonely sentries waiting for the competitors to arrive. It was no surprise when Alfie Cox was first on the scene in the Pro Action Castrol KTM. Cox had bombed his way to the front and was starting to stamp his authority on the race.
Alfie! Alfie, you're something to eat. Quickly.
A band of local spectators were intrigued by what was going on, but Cox had other matters on his mind. Last year, Cox lost the Roof of Africa rally when he missed a route control checkpoint, and this time the experienced Springbok was taking no chances. Darryl Curtis and Errol Dalton arrived at the refuel simultaneously. For the bikers, there's no such thing as the luxury of a service crew to lend a helping hand, and it's every man for himself.
5, 6. 5, 6. This is the last refuel.
While Dalton and Curtis rode back into battle, new 200 class leader Alex Vowles arrived at the refuel point in 4th place on the Antilex Dairy Kawasaki. In a tremendous effort, Vowles had moved ahead of Richard Manning to slot in behind the leading 250 class machines at the front of the field.
Fine. How's it going? All right.
At the end of day one, the Chepex and Sulwalds led the car section ahead of Derek Johnson, who turned in a 5-star performance on the Yamaha quad. For the Chepex, the situation could have been a little better.
And then we got to Duncroft Pass, and around the one corner there was like a big washout. There were no rocks in it, so you couldn't drive through it, but we fell into it, and it was too late, so we couldn't move backwards or forwards. So we had to reconstruct a little bridge, and took a few people helped us, and we took about 20 minutes collecting a whole lot of rocks and building this hollowed up. And then by that time the Sulwalds caught up with us again, so we had to pull a bit of a lead on them, but at the moment I'm not sure, but they say we've got about a 20-minute lead.
On the motorcycle side, Alfie Cox was on track for his 6th roof victory. Vowles led the 200 class ahead of Graham McLaughlin, with Yuri Human out in front in the 500 class.
I've got a 10-minute gap, so it's better than nothing for tomorrow. But then the pressure's also on me tomorrow because I've got to not make any mistakes, and I've got to keep a cool head and just maintain a good steady pace like I did today.
Stay tuned for more Roof of Africa highlights.